So, welcome to Paranormal Triage. My name is Brenda,
And I'm Ryan.
and this is the beginning of our journey and the story we want to share with you about how we started and how we came to be as Paranormal Triage, and maybe to explain what the spiritual awakening means to us. So, I know we did our individual intros about how each of us came to believe in the paranormal, spirits, ghosts, however you want to label it. So we kind of want to touch on that tonight. And if you have any questions, please leave comments and thoughts, ideas, your own personal experiences, and we'll get back to you and answer any questions you may have. So I know for me, I talked about when I was younger having connections with things that didn't make sense to me. I don't know if you had that for
Mm,
yourself when you were younger, but I certainly did.
no, I really didn't have it like that. I mean, I'll talk about some of my experiences, but it's mostly as a young adult, not really as a kid.
Yeah. So for me, I think I've always been a little bit sensitive. I really didn't know what that meant. Um, so over the course of the years and getting older, it's starting to become more clear that I'm potentially an empath. So I think as an adult, my first experiences, I lived in a house with my young girls, and it was a two-bedroom house, and we kind of lived in a rough neighborhood. And after we moved into this house, I did discover that there was a murder that took place in the next yard over, and it was like a year prior to me moving into that house. And we didn't have an attic, but we had a crawl space. But when we were watching TV, you would hear somebody walking in the attic we didn't have. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't raccoons or mice or rats or anything like that, because living in the rural area, you get pretty used to those sounds. And me and my girls would just kind of look at each other, and we would turn
What
the
is
TV
that?
up and just kind of go about our night. So, yeah, we just kind of left it at that. At that time, I wasn't into ghost hunting or paranormal. I didn't even know what that meant. Of course, we all know about demons and Ouija boards, but as a kid, I never messed with that stuff. And then we ended up moving across the way to another, well, it was in the same town, but it was the next main rural road over. And at that time, I became an EMT. And I've been asked a lot if I ever had spirits visit me, but at that time, I wouldn't have known because I didn't know, what that
Hmm.
meant.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of the feelings I was having, and if I was having them, I didn't understand what they were, and you just kind of brush it off as being like weird or
Yeah. Just, my head's playing with me or my eyes are playing with
yeah,
me.
or I'm having anxiety. Who
Yeah.
knows?
I'm
Raising kids
tired.
gives you a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So, um, I did have this traffic collision. It was a couple of boys that got hit on a moped, and those boys were friends with my kids, and they had sat on my couch, been to my house, visited,
Hmm.
and the one boy passed away. He was my patient, and that night he came to see me, and it was pretty strange because you get tired on those types of calls. It's very draining and it's emotional, and people get emotional, and it was a pretty crazy call. I'm not going to go into too many details about it, but our calls get pretty crazy sometimes. And so I was in my room, and I kind of live in a trailer where bedrooms are on each end of the house, and then you have these vents that have light in them, and the light would kind of shine through. So I was kind of laying there in my bed, and I open my eyes and I see the typical big black ball light that everybody talks about. I guess it's not light, it's just a ball of darkness. And it scared me so much I jumped out of my bed, and I'm like, holy cow, what was that? And I'm like, no, I'm just stressed out from this call we had. And I ended up putting a nightlight in the wall, and I stack all my pillows up against the wall on my bed because now I'm kind of freaked out. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I had a little bit of pillow in front of me, and I kind of laid down sitting up, and I closed my eyes, and it almost felt like somebody did a full hand slap on the pillow. And I could hear it, and I could feel it, and then a cold wind blew across my face. And I know it was that boy. I know it was him. And I think he was just trying to tell me, hey, I'm okay. We're okay. And that's when I realized that there was more to the spirit world than I was willing to accept. So that was my first experience.
That kind of brings up a thought that I've really never thought about before until right now. But when you're responders out there, and if there's any responders watching this, you kind of know that when you deal with some crazy calls and traumatic stuff, your brain sometimes does some weird things, and you know relive the events, once in a while. But that's a very distinct feeling, and I feel like what you're describing is not that. It's something different.
Yeah. That was different than the normal stuff that I felt. But you got to watch for those things because stress can get you. But I moved on, and I didn't have any more experiences after that. He visited me one time, and that was it.
At least not until later.
Not until later.
Yeah. My experience is kind of, growing up religious and Catholic. You believe in kind of the biblical side of spirits and guardian angels and people looking out for you from a spiritual sense. And some of the things really, I wouldn't say are like ghostly, but my first experience that made me really kind of think was actually when we were planning our wedding, and we were kind of stressed out over some money and how we're going to come up with this right now, to finish our deposit on something. I don't remember what it was for. But I have some firearms that my grandfather, left to me when he passed away. And, some of my thoughts were maybe I can go to the pawn shop and turn them in and then go pay it back and pick them up later. And, we needed like $500 like the next day. And I went to go get the mail after having those thoughts. And I had a letter from my grandmother, which is the random check for $500.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was very strange. One of those things that just makes you think.
Yeah.
Not really like a ghost thing that happened, but makes you think like
the universe was listening.
The universe was listening, exactly. And that kind of makes sense later on in life. But from a paranormal standpoint, I think my biggest eye-opening experiences that I've really kind of noticed was the house we lived in that ranch.
Yeah, the ranch house. It was crazy. I loved that house. It was a beautiful house.
It was a great house.
It's kind of like the house that, like, I don't know, it's like the white picket fence, but from, the old school days, when, houses were built by men, the fathers, the dads, the grandfathers, the brothers. And it was a 2-story house with a basement. And it had the wraparound deck on it, and it was, off the roadway, had a creek behind it. It was like that typical farmhouse that I think anybody would want to live in the 1800s.
And we got super lucky because we were renting that house.
Yeah.
But the guy who owns it has a cattle company, and it was a working cattle ranch. There was, the farm hands lived at the house next door, and it's not really next door. It was like 200 yards next door.
It was fairly close. But
yeah, there was cows all over the place, and it was just it was a working ranch. You'd see the dogs work and stuff. So it was a really interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It was more scarier, the spirits in the house or the big cows. Because like from a distance, they're like awesome. You're like, oh my God, we live on a cow ranch.
I remember coming home from work one day and you were out there chasing a bull with a broom to get away from the deck.
They would get out of their pen somehow. I don't know. And then all of a sudden you have like 25 huge cows in your yard. You're like, man, I don't know.
And here I come from a place that's, they don't have cow ranches where I grew up in. And I come home and I see her with the regular dust broom chasing a big old bull out of the backyard.
Yeah, they're a lot bigger when you get right close up to them. So yeah.
But that gives you an idea of kind of the ambiance of what that house was, and the people that inhabited that house before us, dating all the way back into the early 1900s.
Yeah, it was an apple orchard.
Right? They were farming and working people.
Yep.
And there was a lot of history and stories there that you learned a little bit of it, but
So the workers actually used to live in what they call the quarters, which was in the basement of the house. And and you could tell it was a basement, you know.
Mhm.
By the time we rented it, it was pretty old, and, you know, yeah, you had counters and stuff, but it didn't really look like living quarters. It kind of looked like more of a shop at that point.
Yeah.
But you could tell it was living quarters, you know. So, but in the part of that bottom of the basement, like when we first moved in, we're like, man, this is so cool. And you go down, it's like, oh, look at this furnace. It's so cool. We'll be able to fire. And, but right behind that furnace was this dirt area. And it kind of went down at an angle, and it had some weird artifacts in there. Not like so much weird, but old. And you almost wanted to go in there and look at them, but there's always something that just didn't want you
There
to
was
cross.
just that feeling, that
Yeah.
gut feeling, like I shouldn't mess with this
Yeah,
stuff. But
so-
there was cool, like old
Coke
Coke bottles and
cans.
all sorts of old stuff down in there, tools.
But it was weird that that was the only open space in that whole house. Like there was no other part in that house like that unfinished dirt area.
No.
So
Yeah, the whole basement was dirt, but that part was like kind of sloped down. I don't know if it was like, maybe that was the cellar, like the old root
It could have been a
cellars back in the day.
it could have been, yeah. But it was weird. Yeah, you didn't want to go over there and mess with anything. So we never did, you know, and so we finally get moved into this house. And it was great at first. The rooms were really quirky. You know, one of the rooms was kind of like, they called it the bowling room, and it was long and rectangular. And then that was for my youngest daughter. And then in the middle was another little room that was pretty well lit, but it was kind of an odd room, but it was pretty. It was kind of like maybe where you'd want to put your grandma while she's sewing or something like that. But that's kind of where it was just an extra room. And then the room to the left of the house, that was my oldest daughter's room. And that room was weird. It
had some weird angles.
Had weird angles. The paint was dark, and it had the typical what do you call it? The Amityville horror window that you'd see in
Amityville horror, like the typical scary house, haunted house. Like
the window where you could see the little
outside.
old lady peeking out at you.
Yeah, very much so.
So, but it was a great house, you know. But at nighttime, it was scary. And, you know, it got really dark at nighttime out there, and then you got all these cows wandering around, and you would have to go down to the basement to start your fire for the furnace, because it obviously wasn't.
Yeah, the heating was a wood furnace in the basement. That was the only source of heat. So
yeah, so you'd have to go down there, and then you got that dirt hill, and you'd be building a fire, and it would literally feel like somebody was sitting on your shoulder. And it freaked you out so bad. It's like, I'm not going to look back. I'm just going to do what I'm doing. I'm going to build this fire. And me personally, I would run up to the stairs, slam the door, and I would never look back, because it was that creepy at nighttime.
I always tried to take the dog down with me.
Yeah.
I just felt better with the dog, because you had that, like, someone's looking at you.
Yeah.
Close enough that you could almost feel like they're breathing on you.
Right. Yeah. It was strange. I have never had that scared feeling in any other house that I've ever lived in. Even when the boy that passed away in my other house came to see me, that didn't even scare me as much as going down to build that fire in the furnace. And then when nobody was home, like I said in my other video, that, you know, I would kind of hide out in my bedroom because I was truly scared, you know, and I can't really say why. I mean, it just got dark, and just the whole ambiance of the house changed. So.
And the thing about it is, like, other than being a little creepy and having those feelings, I personally never really experienced anything like actual paranormal, like, until we were moving out of that house.
Yeah, we weren't watching shows back then. There was no Ghost Adventures for us. There was no paranormal.
Yeah, I mean, we were
360 or 390. There was no Dave Schrader's and Zach Bagans and things of that nature. Not for us.
No, we hadn't been exposed to any of that entertainment yet, so we really weren't watching anything like that.
Yeah. So we lived in that house for a year, and I can't say nothing really negative or bad happened. It was just creepy. So when we were moving out, you know, you get down to the last stuff, and you're just checking everything to make sure you didn't leave anything behind. And remember the midget doors up there. So in these old houses, I call them the midget doors, but they're just short doors, and they had latches that you had to latch down, and they were kind of hard to shut, and they were definitely hard. They just didn't pop open. the latches just didn't pop off and the door
No,
couldn't
that was
open.
that was wood from, the mid 1900s when they built that stuff. So there were solid doors. They were
Yeah.
heavy, and it was like storage space in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a big closet.
So the last day that we were moving out, I had went up, brought everything down that I was going to take out. It was pretty empty up there. I went up, I shut all those midget doors, locked them down, and I get downstairs and I hear a pop. So I'm like, oh, that's weird. So I go back up, and it was in my oldest daughter's room, the weird room that was kind of dark and creepy, and just it was just a weird room. But all the midget doors were open in that room. And I was like, okay, I'm out. But earlier, before that incident happened, I had taken the phone off the wall when we still had cords on our phones.
Mm-hmm.
We still had landlines with long cords. I had taken that phone off the wall and I wrapped the cord around the phone like you do, and I set it on a desk. I think it was in a box on a desk, and that's where I left it. And then you'd have to take it from there.
Yeah, and to kind of give you an idea of those small doors, that was only on the second floor.
Yeah, only on the second floor.
So the first floor didn't have those.
No.
But so she had already left with the kids, and a friend of mine came over to help move a few of the heavy items, and we're packing up stuff and moving it out to the carport where we had like a car and a trailer and everything else, and this little desk, it's a small little like 3 foot by, it's just something you put a computer on, right? But on top of that was the box that had some random books and stuff, and then it had that phone.
Where was that phone?
The desk really wasn't that heavy, but it's kind of awkward to walk through the house to get out to where the carport was. And so my buddy and I pick up this thing and start walking, and all of a sudden that phone, very distinct because it's an old phone, has a bell when it rings, and it started ringing.
Yeah.
And
you guys said it rang like 8 times, right?
Oh, yeah. It rang several times, and it continued to ring. So we just kind of looked at each other. I really didn't know what to do. So I picked it up and unwrapped the cord, and I actually answered the phone. And there was no dial tone, no voices, nothing on the other end, and it stopped ringing, and it was weird. We kind of looked at each other like, all right, we're going to get the heck out of here. Let's wrap this stuff up. And we got outside of the house to where the carport was, and it was a good day, probably 70 outside, and this was probably maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was a nice day.
Not a cloud in the sky, except over the house.
Yeah.
Because it decided it wanted to hail like crazy right over the house where we were at.
And it was a nice day. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a clear, nice, sunny day.
And when you look out, you could see across the pasture where the cows are at, it was dry. There was no hail. You could see the dirt driveway, and you could see a distinct line where the hail had stopped. You look next door to the ranch hand's house, dry. And it just hailed for probably 3 or 4 minutes or something like that, and then just stopped.
Yep.
So we kind of looked at each other and said, I don't care about loading any of this stuff up. We're just going to leave. So we ended up going back a couple of days later to finish that up.
Well, to take it back a step, when we first moved into that house, it was our first house together, and conveniently enough, he gets the flu.
Yeah.
What a shocker. So that left me and my girls to kind of move in that first night by ourselves. And because it was dark and it was kind of creepy and we weren't used to it yet, I got a bunch of snacks and stuff together, and there was a TV in my youngest daughter's room, which was the bowling room, the long room. And we went in there, we got all set up, and I'm like, oh, I forgot something. Well, the door had shut, the bedroom door, and I went to get out, and it was locked. And it was, I don't even know how it was locked. There was no lock on the inside. There was no lock on the outside of the door, and I couldn't get us out of the door. I would have had to kick the door in. And I ended up calling Ryan and like, hey, we're locked in this room, and we can't get out.
Oh, I had to bring my tools and take the doorknob apart, which is like a Victorian doorknob.
Yeah.
The kind with like the old school skeleton keys.
Yeah, it made no sense what happened.
There's no reason why it should have been locked from the inside.
Yeah, made no sense at all. So that was kind of weird.
Yeah, that is. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But to kind of wrap that up at the house, the very last day when I was moving the last few things out, or the night before the last day, I had the pickup truck and went around. I had just a couple boxes. So they were in the basement. Pulled them out of the basement, put them in the truck. I had the dog with me. Walked through the entire house, made sure all the lights were off. Everything was good. It was completely empty. And get in the truck and start driving around the house back out to the driveway. And I just had that just overall feeling of like,
Just that uneasy feeling.
Uneasy, creepy. Okay, something is behind me.
Yep.
Now my dog is in the passenger seat of the truck, and all the hair is standing up on him, and he's looking out the back window, and he is barking like he wants to jump out there and eat something.
Yeah. Yeah, when Ollie was like wanting to get something, he would let you know about it. There was
not
he made
just
no bones about
barker dog. He would only go out and do that if he was scared of something.
Yeah.
So I turned over my shoulder, and out of that classic top window, I could see a black shaped figure. And it was like, put it in drive and put the pedal to the metal, and I left as fast as I could. Didn't look back, but I did end up going back the next day to turn the key into the owner of the property.
Yeah. And that window was a weird way. I mean, anytime you left the house, you just didn't look back at that window because you always thought there was somebody staring at you. You just knew if you looked back, there was going to be something there. So it was just better not to look and not invite that in.
And when I turned the key in, I kind of jokingly explained some of the stuff that happened to us over the last few days of wrapping up our moving. And he told us that he and his friends have had similar experiences in that house.
Yeah.